It's always really fun for me to take a look at different NHL scenarios and different NHL trade ideas that ultimately get rejected by one of the two parties that are involved. We've spoken about Thatcher Demko trade rumors for Matt Dumba, how those were rejected by Vancouver. We had Taylor Hall to Calgary rejected, a three-way Keith Yandle trade rejected, and the Patrick Laine Carolina thing that was rejected over and over again. But in today's video, we're going over a newly revealed rejected trade, as brought to us by Elliotte Friedman and Jeff Marek on the 31 Thoughts podcast. This one's going on between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers that actually would have seen the Maple Leafs acquire a guy who, in my opinion, is a very, very highly effective NHL player today. But it was actually apparently their hand that said, no thank you, let's move on. And in fact, the players that are mentioned in this idea kind of give a big indication as to when these talks went down, because if you go over onto NHL Watch's Twitter, he tweets out the overall status. I'm going to read this because it's easier to screenshot and put it on the screen, but the link will be in the description if you want to go ahead and listen to the newest episode of the 31 Thoughts podcast yourself. Take a look at this trade right here. Friedman and Marek were talking about how well MacKenzie Weegar is playing for the Florida Panthers. Marek brought up how Kyle Dubas was interested in Weegar in the offseason, but Friedman said that the Panthers wanted Travis Dermott and Andreas Johnsson in a deal. Toronto said no. So there is our rejected trade idea over here that apparently went down during the offseason. Andreas Johnsson and Travis Dermott from the Toronto Maple Leafs to the Florida Panthers in exchange for MacKenzie Weegar. Now, because there's a bigger amount of Leafs fans out there than there are Florida Panthers fans, let's just go over MacKenzie Weegar right here and talk about why he would be valued in this kind of context. So, MacKenzie Weegar is a 6 feet tall, 201-pound right-handed defenseman, 27 years of age, who in the current NHL season has 7 points in 15 games played. Now, points aren't everything, especially for the defensive side of things, but MacKenzie Weegar has legitimately been one of the better Florida Panthers defensemen on this entire squad, and the leaps and bounds that he's taken, as well as a lot of the other players in the Panthers have taken, they all combine for a Florida Panthers team that is literally first in the entire Central Division. They're up there with 24 points in 15 games played, the most points out of all the teams, over Carolina, Chicago, Tampa, Columbus, Dallas, Nashville, and Detroit. The Florida Panthers are the kings of that division at the moment, and on a 3-game win streak, MacKenzie Weegar has been a very big part of this team's overall success. And as a right-handed guy who can put up some points but also play the right way in his own end, he's been a very valuable piece for this Panthers team, all in all. So it's very interesting to see how Kyle Dubas, Toronto's guy who is out there looking for a right-handed defenseman to fill in on the right side after TJ Brodie departed from the squad, was really looking forward to seeing how a MacKenzie Weegar trade could shape up. Now, we know it didn't happen. It says right here. They said no because the ask was Travis Dermott and Andreas Johnsson. But you got to take a look at what exactly the Toronto Maple Leafs did afterwards, because since Andreas Johnsson is still on the team when these discussions are still going down, we know that this search for MacKenzie Weegar was going on before October 10th, the date that Andreas Johnsson was traded over to New Jersey for Joey Anderson, who's only suited up for 1 game so far. He had 0 points in that game he has played for Toronto. Around this time, the Toronto Maple Leafs went out there and they signed TJ Brodie, a guy who's a left-handed player, but he plays on the right side defense. And they also signed Zach Bogosian as well, who was over here as another right-handed defenseman who was brought in for depth purposes because he's a big guy, he's a tall guy, and yeah, you kind of get the point here. Not to mention Justin Hall, who was also brought in recently from the Colorado Avalanche trade, the second one, mind you, and you have yourselves what is a revamped Toronto Maple Leafs right-handed defensive core. So, where does MacKenzie Weegar fit into all of this? Well, it's the idea that a Travis Dermott would have been a return piece as well as Andreas Johnsson. Now, when it comes to the Leafs, we all kind of know the biggest problem the Leafs had earlier in the offseason was cap space. And on that front, I'll be proud to tell you right here that it actually could have worked out if you played your cards correctly, because MacKenzie Weegar right now is on a 3-year contract that expires in 2023, where he's making an AAV of $3.25 million a season. He will be 29, 30-ish when this contract expires, and if he continues playing the way he has been playing this season, and he improves upon that because he's kind of in his prime, the room for growth isn't really there in my opinion, but he is still playing extraordinarily well. This is a guy who definitely could have a very big payday if he continues this very strong play until 2023, but regardless, he is still showing off this season more than ever before why he was given that money, and in fact, it's kind of an underpayment for the kind of performance he has been showing out there for Florida. So, if a trade like this went down where it was Dermott and Johnsson for MacKenzie Weegar, what you would have had was a decor that is pretty much the same as it is now, except you swap out Dermott for Weegar. Because Weegar's a right-handed guy, you have a lot more luxury playing this guy on the right side. And who knows if that makes a guy like Justin Hall expendable, or a Zach Bogosian, whom you just acquired, also expendable. Because if you have that proper functioning rotation on the right side, MacKenzie Weegar is one of your better players. He's already a top 4 guy. Maybe have Brody as the other top 4 guy as well. Who knows? There's a little bit of a rotation that you can do there. And for Andreas Johnsson, well, he's a guy that you didn't really have on your team anyway because you traded him away for Joey Anderson. My question to you right here is, would you have done this trade knowing what you know now about how well Weegar is performing, knowing what you know now about how difficult it's been for Travis Dermott to find his way into the lineup, and knowing what you know now about the return the Leafs got in Joey Anderson for Andreas Johnsson? This is the kind of move that might come back to bite Toronto in the behind because they didn't do it because of how things are shaping up right now. Joey Anderson isn't this game-breaking NHL talent already. He's got a little bit more time to develop before he becomes that. But Travis Dermott's a guy who isn't being played, and the way Seattle is going to come in here, it would make a lot of sense, in my opinion, if the Seattle Kraken took Travis Dermott away from the Toronto Maple Leafs. So, imagine if that happens. Imagine the Kraken come in here, and they take Dermott away from Toronto. You're left with Joey Anderson on the squad, whom you traded for in the Andreas Johnsson trade. Does that make this rejected trade idea here, where the Panthers were asking for Johnsson and Dermott for MacKenzie Weegar, a lot more worse? Because let's say the Leafs did this trade instead. They said, okay, screw it. We'll take on MacKenzie Weegar's contract for Andreas Johnsson and Travis Dermott. All of a sudden, that's an extra body that you will probably need to protect in the expansion draft, but it makes other guys in your team expendable because of how good Weegar is and he can be. As we noted, you guys got a loaded right side of defense that was pretty much thrown together this offseason. Bogosian's new, Hall was reacquired, and you also have TJ Brody, who was a big free agent signing. So, does that change the direction of how the rest of the Leafs' cap moves in the offseason go? Which is why, in my opinion, it's not really all too sufficient to just take a look at they have $29,000 in cap space today. They could not have made that trade because they would still have $3-something million over the books because Joey Anderson was the guy they acquired in the Johnsson trade who was very, very cheap. There are other moves to this, man. There are domino pieces that fall after, which is why an idea like this is super interesting to me, because had the Toronto Maple Leafs traded away Johnsson and Dermott for MacKenzie Weegar from Florida, a guy who is legitimately really good now, things could have been different with the way they decided to build the rest of their defense core. So, talk to me in the comments what you think about this idea. Obviously, it's just one little thing thrown out there by Marek and Friedman, so let me know in the comments if I'm correct in my analysis. Florida Panthers fans, I haven't really talked to you guys all too much. What do you think of MacKenzie Weegar? Would you be in a position where this kind of trade intrigues you? Because the way I understand it, MacKenzie Weegar has really taken a big step up from last year and his performance in years prior to this year. You guys are on top of the Central, and MacKenzie Weegar's really one of the guys who's helping you be a part of that. So let me know in the comments what you thought about this idea. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.